So today I got a different talk from my usual talks because I'm going to do a full live demo. I'm not going to show you a lot of slides. This talk is about having a better data fetching solution in Nuxt, specifically for Nuxt, since we're doing Nuxt Nation this time. But the solution is not only for Nuxt, just to be clear. So my name is Eduardo. On GitHub, you can find me as Posva, also on Twitter or Blue Sky. I'm the author of Vue Router and Pinia. And today I want to show you how much we can improve data fetching for Nuxt with Pinia Colada. So what I have prepared for you is a migration that I've already done in the past. So the version that you see here is the actual deployed version, as you can see by the URL. It's a bit small, but you can probably imagine that you don't see the numbers there, so it's not a local host. This is a demo you can visit yourself, and you have just some to-dos, very simple to-dos. It's also showcasing Nuxt Hub, by the way. And so we have two versions, one that is called to-dos and the other one optimistic to-dos. My goal is to show you today both. So it's more, instead of giving you a talk about Pinia Colada as API, let me show you how to migrate directly a working version of an application with Pinia Colada and make it better. So what we have right now is only this page, which is one with the to-dos, and we have what we call loading states, so to say. So for example, if I try to add one to-do here, probably some reloads. Yeah, I got logged out. So as you can see, we have some loading states on the side. So what I mean by loading state is that the application is going to become unresponsive. It's going to enter a loading state of, hey, I'm waiting for data to come back. Request is being made. So I cannot let you do some actions, right? So let's see what the code looks like for this. So what I have in the background is the server running with a version that is not on the actual repository right now, because this was the previous version that was using useFetch and then just some regular fetches. And what we can see here is that we have three different operations that I'm going to call notations, and one query here, which is the read operation, which is using useFetch. So my goal today is first show you how to make this code more expressive by following a declarative approach with Pinia Colada. And the second one is going to make the UX smooth even when we have a slow internet. So that's thanks to optimistic updates. So first of all, what is Pinia Colada? So Pinia Colada is a state management, an async state management library. It's a plugin for Pinia. But that, I mean that it has a few stores, a few methods, and it relies on storing the state with Pinia and also using the plugin system of Pinia. Other than that, the goal is really to remove all the boilerplate related to async state management. And instead of showing you the docs, I'm just going to show you the code of what we need to do. Let me just reload the page. Okay. So I already installed everything like in documentation. What I want to do is start right away by migrating my queries. I'm going to start first by the query and then by the mutations. So a query is any operation that does a read, right? So most of the time it's a get, but some APIs might have a post or a put. The idea is that you're reading information from the server and this information can change over time. So here we're using useFetch, and in Pinia Colada we're going to use useQuery. So here is the use query. It's auto-imported. As you can see here, it comes from Pinia Colada. It's auto-imported. And we're going to pass an object. And in this object, we have a query function, which is going to be what we have here. So useFetch is using a special $fetch behind the scenes. So you might be tempted to do fetch here and almost like that, but it's actually a little bit different. I'm going to call these fetch. Use request fetch. Behind the scenes, use fetch uses this fetch, so we need to actually use this one. Let me just go back here. Up. Give me just this 1 second. There we go. So this is the first part, right? We want to have, all right. We want to have the query, which is going to be the function that returns a promise with the data. And then the second part is the key. The key is going to be a unique key that allows the cache to store these results somewhere. Just that. Okay. And then we have some TypeScript error, and I've seen that before. Let's just remove the formatting. We are going to just say as here, not to, maybe not. Sometimes I have these errors, but it's not related to Pinia Colada, it's just Nuxt. I'm going to ignore it then. So use query is going to give us a very similar code here. So it's actually just the same. It's data to do's and then refresh. We also have that. And then we can remove this function. Now, one thing here is we're not going to use the refresh function. We're going to make it differently because the idea is this query is going to automatically call the refresh for us whenever it's needed. And instead of having to couple the mutations and the query like we have right now, or we had before I changed the code, we're going to decouple them thanks to the cache. And the cache is going to play the role of a bridge between the query and the mutations. And this is going to be very interesting because in this application, we have just one page, but in real applications, we have more than just one component for a page. We have maybe the mutation happening in a subcomponent and the query happening on the page. So it's not as simple as having everything in one single component. All right. So another point here to note is that the key is an array. This is because the keys in Pinia Colada are hierarchical. So I'm not going to go through everything in this demo, but the idea is you can have invalidations of cache and cache that are connected based on the key. So when you invalidate, for example, a list of users, you can also invalidate any detailed version of that user list that you had. So here we only have these to do, so it doesn't change much. But it's an interesting concept that is worth checking out if you're interested in learning more. All right. So that's pretty much it. We don't have any await, as you can notice here, but it's still awaited in the server. So we still have SSR happening behind the scenes. This is thanks to on-server prefetch. And now we can move on to some of the mutations, which is the interesting part, right? So let's start by the last one, which is the delete, which is one of the simplest one. We're going to call use mutation here, and we're going to pass an object as well. And this object is going to contain the mutation function. And I'm going to make it a narrow function because it's easier. And so in this mutation, we're going to pass the fetch that we have from the bottom. So it's actually fetch is just good enough. And we just call delete, and we need to pass the ID. So just the same code that we have underneath. To do.id. The only thing missing is this to do. So we're going to add that parameter as well. So we go here and we just put it there. And I have an extra S there. So that's it. So pretty much the same as having the function here. So we're doing the fetch, and now we have to check about everything else that we do. So we are awaiting the deletion to be finished, and then we are doing some kind of local update. Now this is interesting because I think the correct version that Sebastian wanted to do was more like this. So you update the version before doing the request, and then you handle locally if it works, which is not there. So this is like a partial optimistic update, but not really. It's not really useful. So this line is not really that useful because we're doing a refresh right after, which is going to update the to-do list So it's going to check the server for a new version and then just display a toast. So what we have here is a refresh when we're finished. And there is also one thing that is not taken into account is that if we, for any reason, the delete fails, that probably means that we don't have an up-to-date version of the to list. So we should also refresh in that case. So instead of just doing it after a succeed, we should also do it on an error. So here we could have a try catch. In this version, we're gonna use unsettled. So unsettled happens in both scenarios if we have an error or if we succeed. And we can just call refresh. Now I did remove refresh, so we're gonna call something different and I'm gonna show you in a moment. But first, let me add the unsuccess, which is going to allow me to have the toast. So here, I'm just copying over this line. And the result that we get here is the actual return value from the fetch. Okay, so we don't have refresh anymore, right? I kept it, but we're not going to use it. So what do we use instead? Instead, we're going to use the query cache. So the query cache is not here yet. So what I do is up here, I'm going to do query cache. Yeah, that's correct. Query cache, use query cache. Again, this comes from Pinia, and what we have is actually a Pinia store that has a lot of actions related to cache, and this allows us to, for example, invalidate queries. And so we can specify different filters. In this case, just the key is enough, and we can call invalidate queries on that, meaning that automatically any query with this key is going to be invalidated and refetch if necessary. So depending on, for example, if it's active, if it's not active, if it's not used in any page, if any visible component, then it's not going to refetch. But if it's being used, which is the case because we are in this scenario in just one page, we're going to get a new version. And then I can just remove that. So that's the migration. It takes a bit more lines. I also added a couple of empty lines here. But of course, it's all very organized and it's easy to extend, which is what we want here, being able to extend. And so now I'm going to do the same what the toggle is to do, which is pretty much the same. So I'm going to do, oh yeah, sorry. I forgot to get the result from the mutation. So we get a mutate function that I'm going to rename into delete to do, I think. Yes. We can have access to other things which are similar to queries, but I'm not going to cover that yet. So here, use mutation. I'm going to do very similar mutation. And what do we do? This. So I'm just going to copy this. And we do need a to-do here. So let's go here. Just like that. All right. So we have the mutation working. And then let's check the actual code that we have here. So we are toggling the completed of the to-do. So I probably need to do the same here because I didn't move that. So a number of to-do, copy this line here. And then we have again a refresh. So this is again the same concept. We are invalidating the cache and refetching again. So we do the same. We just do unsettled and then invalidate the query. Same as the code that we have here. And last but not least, we're going to get our function. So mutate is going to go toggle to do. And then we can just remove that. All right. So these are very similar. Now let's take a look at the add to do, which is a little bit more complicated. The add to do is streaming the value and doing nothing if it's just empty blank spaces. And then we have a local loading state that we set to true and it's set to false in the end. And so we're posting the to do, we are pushing the to do locally. So it's like a, again, half-baked optimistic update. Then we're refreshing and then we have this toast and then we're focusing the input again. And then if we have an error, we want to show a toast. So let's do in a few places. So first part, mutation. Okay, mutation is always the first part. We only need the to do, right? So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to simplify it right here. So I don't need the return, the new to do value here. Why not? What I'm going to do here is put title, which is a string, and I'm going to remove it from here. And I'm going to say if title trim I can return, but instead I'm just going to throw a new error. Utility is required. Because the idea is this mutation, if the title is invalid, it should throw, right? It's supposed to be an error. It should never enter this state because the form is probably setting the input to required. All right, so that's the first part. And then we have the error handling, which is the part that I'm going to do first. We have this here. Okay, I can copy that. And then here and do on error. I have an error and I'm going to paste the code. So here we have just an error. What I'm going to do, I think I have a is result. Yeah, there you go. All right. Although this is going to be undefined, right? Yeah. So it actually had a few bugs there before, I guess, but it's fine. So now we have done the catch. Now I need to do the success here. So we have an invalidation again, the refresh. So let's do that. Oh, although same as before, if we also want to handle the error case, so let's just do unsettle. And then we have onSuccess, and onSuccess is just showing the to-do that was created. Let me check if it's the same. Yes. And then we are going to clear the input. We're going to clear the input and then focus the input. We're going to change these a little bit more. But before that, let me just buckle up and show you a working version, right? So here, the last part I need is mutate, which is going to be the to do. And you might notice that we have this loading state here, right, that we set to true and then to false in the same function. So I'm going to remove that because it's actually just the is loading here. And I'm going to name that loading just not to rename anything on the template. And I can remove this function completely. All right. So I shouldn't have any errors on the side, and these should be working. So here, let's open the console. Okay. Everything, these warnings are normals. That's one. And we have already a bug. So we have, so I think I forgot a return basically. No, I have it here. Let me check real quick. What did I mess up? Okay, first of all, it's not doing anything, right? So when I reload the page, or let's do even better. Let's go here. Let's go to the to-dos. We are fetching the to-dos, which is empty. And then if I do a new one, is it posting a new one? Okay, so it's not sending the add to-do, which is a bit weird. Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot, of course. Since my function now receives the actual text of the to-do, I need to put here the new to-do. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I think the other ones probably need some changing. Tool to do. Okay, the other ones are correct. Yeah, this one was just being called like that. So let's add it now, and there we go. So as you can see, I removed the refresh call completely. There is no more refresh call or anything. And now we have a version that automatically updates. Everything else also works. So what I don't have working is the focus, and I'm gonna fix that in a moment. If I reload the page, you see that I have the same. Now the issue with this version is that if we have a slow internet, because we are in this loading state, the UI is going to become completely unresponsive while we are waiting for the data. And as you can see, we have other things like delayed. I click there and it changed a lot longer. Here I click in multiple things and it takes forever to update. So let me first fix the focusing. The focus is not working here because we actually need to wait 2 ticks. When we schedule this tick, we're still waiting for the unsuccess. So the query still waits for the unsuccess and the unsettle if it does anything. So after that, only loading becomes false and the input becomes undisabled. So it becomes enabled again. So it means that we need to wait for 2 ticks, which is a bit weird. I'm not gonna deny that, but so how do we write this a little bit more? It's like then we do another next tick and then we can try to focus. I think that's the idea. Let's see if it works. And then it should focus. No. Oh yeah, now it worked. Okay. Without the throttling, it looks like this. Okay. All right. So this is the version that is similar to what we have. But what I want to propose you today is something that it looks much better. So the optimistic update is really about so first, yeah, what is the optimistic update? The idea is most of the time when we're doing an operation on our application, we know how the data will be impacted after that change. So when we modify the list of to-dos, we know that locally our to-do list is just going to have a new to-do entry on the array. So what we can do is instead of waiting for the request to go on and to go to the server and come back, we change locally the data at the same time we send the request. So even before sending the request. And usually most of the time it just works out, right? It comes back, it succeeds, and we still refetch just in case the data, and because things are the same, nothing happens. But the issue, and this is the complicated part, right, is that if we have an error, we need to roll back to the previous version, and that can become a little bit more complicated depending on the cases. So today I want to show you, if I have the time, to show you a complete version of the rolling back. So I'm going to start again by changing the delete because the delete is one of the easiest one. So we're going to keep the unsettle and the unsuccess. These are not going to change, I recall, if I recall correctly. What we need to change, what we need to do is to change the local version. So we're going to change the data on the cache in order to let the application render a new version. So here I'm going to use the unmutate. The unmutate hook is a little bit different because it's called when the mutation, even before calling mutation, right? So here we have the to-do, which is going to be the same as we have here. And we want to a couple of things. First, we need to get the previous version of the arrays of the to-dos. We're going to save a copy in order to roll back. Then we're going to find the to-do that the user is trying to delete. Then we're going to create a new version of the array of to-dos. We're going to put that in the cache, and we're going to return a few variables that can be used in the other hooks in case things fail. So the first thing is going to be the old to-dos, and we're going to use another function of the query cache. We're going to get the query data of the to-dos. Then we're going to try to find the index of the one missing there. So here I notice that we have this. We can instead do an empty array if there is nothing. Yeah, you don't need -1. And so then we're going to check if we have that all to do, if the to do is there. So if to do index is you get a -1, we're going to update, so create a new copy of the array. So what I'm going to do here is actually create a new to do's. Do I need to do splice here? probably not. I mean, we could do a slice here. It's fine. So we have a copy. And here we can do to-dos.splice. Oops. And we just remove that version. What did I change? This is an array, slice, an array, and oh, okay, just a typo. So we splice that value, and then what we do is we set in the query cache the data to this new version. And now, do I even need to do that here? Probably not. Now we're going to return the information. So here we can return anything we want. The idea is return any information that might be necessary for our rollback. So we want to return the old to-dos, the new to-dos, and the actual to-do, I think, that we added. But I'm not completely sure about that. So I'm just going to keep it like that. And so now we're still not handling the error, right? So let's add the on-error handler, which was completely missing there. And here we're going to extract the old to-dos and the new to-dos. Now you will notice that these properties can be undefined. And this is because the onMutate can still throw an error, right? And if it throws an error, the mutation won't even run, and it will definitely not return the values here. So these are undefined. So that's how you can have that. Now, here is the simple version, like the rollback is, let's revert the version to the one we had before. But if you want to be very precise, you want to really handle all possible scenarios, you have to do a little bit more than this. So that little bit more is going to check that the version that we have of the cache, or rather that nobody else has touched the cache. So how do we do that? We simply check if the version in the cache is the one that we set here. That's why we return the new to-dos. So we can just check if new to-dos, so if they are not undefined, and if query cache dot get query data is equal to new to-dos. So if we have that, it means that nobody else touched the cache, so we can revert to the old version. We are sure that we are the ones with an error. And then if we want, we can console log the error, right? Console log the error and toast if we want also. Okay, so how does this look here? If we delete a to-do here, it's really fast. But if we do slow, it's still really fast. However, you see that the message that told me, yeah, it was really deleted, happened a few seconds later. So the UI is completely responsive, even though the whole thing is a bit slow. So here I'm in normal, and I can delete things really fast, but if I go to slow, I can still delete really fast. And that's the whole idea, right? I'm not sure how much time left I have. If in the chat they can tell me how many minutes I have. Not much. Okay, so I'm gonna close up. I don't want to go over too much. The idea for the rest of the code is pretty similar, right? The add to do is a little bit more complicated because it's not a little bit more complicated. It's pretty much the same idea. It's just that you have to find the to do on the list, remove it. So the rollback of the data is a little bit different. What I want to show you is how it looks like in the end. So in the end, this is the production version. We have the optimistic to-dos. And one of the things that also optimistic UIs allows us to do is to remove some of the pending states completely. So instead of having a loading here, we just remove that entirely. It doesn't need to be there anymore. And so let's add a few to-dos here. Okay, so you see it's really fast. Now let's do the scrolling, and 3G is really slow. And I can click here as much as I want. I can add things in the middle. You will notice that things are grayed out for a while until they are accepted. But everything else is like everything can be changed, can be pending, and it's just smooth. 100% smooth even with a very, very slow connection. And so to wrap up, just go back to my notes. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything important to say since I skipped adding to-dos. All right. So yeah, this is to conclude, or so to say, the optimistic UI, sorry, is not something you should use everywhere. This is something to be aware of as well. It's more about compare when you have a pending UI where you have these kind of loading states, and an optimistic UI could help the user to use your application smoother, right? If you have one single operation that is blocking everything else, then there is no point in having an optimistic UI, because if the user still has to wait for something to be done on the server before moving on, then there is nothing to do. So just keep that in mind. The idea is that with Pinia Colada, we are enabling this declarative approach where we declare the queries in one part and the mutations in other part, and they communicate with each other thanks to the query cache. So in practice, we don't have just one page with one component. So this approach really helps us decouple the code, keep things declarative so we can focus on the data flow and the business logic, which is one of the main reasons I personally use Vue, and I personally love Vue. And it helps us keep our code way more maintainable in the long run. So just one thing to note is that Pinia Colada is, I have been working on these for a while, so I'm pretty happy with the results. It's still not on 1.0, right? But the foundation that I've shown you is pretty stable. It's not going to change. It's more the plugin API that is still in an experimental state, because I still want to see what is needed by plugins to ensure that Pinia Colada is as extensible as possible, as needed. Also, if you're interested in learning how it was actually built in a part of the exercises of the mastering Pinia. When I was doing my mastering Pinia course, is when I came up with this abstraction that I have created so many times, and I decided to bundle it as an application of how do I do optimistic UIs and cache invalidations. And so this is how Pinia Colada was born. All right, if you are interested in learning more, or if you're using it, please reach out if you have feedback on Twitter or Blue Sky or just GitHub. And thanks for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. We do have a few questions. I know we're short on time, so we're not going through all of them, but we do have a few of what's the difference between Tansac query and Pinia Colada, and why would you why prefer Pinia?
Yeah, so they are very similar. They definitely cover the same problems, right? They solve the same issues. You could say the simple answer is Pinia Colada is my version, my approach to these hash-based client-side async state management. But since Pinia is only for Vue, it has some advantages over Tanstack Query. So it's way smaller. It's like 2 kilobytes and it's less than 3 kilobytes. The baseline is very, very small. And it's really a bit more performant in terms of memory and speed, because it doesn't need to support frameworks like React, which are the way they work behind the scenes, the way you optimize for re-renders is different. So you don't need to handle all of this complexity. Apart from that, it's also more extensible. Like it's the way you can hook into the creation of the cache through Pinia plugins is pretty flexible. And last but not least, it also has data loaders. So data loaders is a new API for the data fetching in Router. So it's really bringing everything together. So here we have data fetching, but it doesn't require the router. And then data loaders is integrating the fetching into the navigation. So it has another whole sets of benefits. And the idea is that you can combine them both so you don't lose any other benefits of having Pinia Colada, and have the best of navigation aware data fetching and cache aware data fetching. so to say.
Great, thank you. All right, up next, does Pina Colada support WebSockets and subscriptions instead of polling and refreshing?
So this is up to your server implementation. Um, the idea of Pinia Colada is more if you have a function that returns a promise, then it will work. So technically, WebSockets are not that. So I would say it's not. It doesn't work like that. So unless you have a way, you can probably work around in a way, but there is no out of the box support for a WebSocket and subscriptions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any considerations with using Pina Colada in a global store?
So if you use query or use mutation especially use query in a global store, in a Pinia store, since the store is global and is never disposed, the cache entry for the query will never be disposed either. So there is something called the garbage collection timer, the garbage collection time. So you can specify that, or you can lower it because by default it's 5 minutes, I think, or 3 minutes. And if a query is not active for that amount of time, it will be garbage collected to avoid having the cache grow indefinitely.
Thank you. And two more. Uh, are we losing types with rfetch?
No, we're not losing the types. I think that was my editor. I don't know why it didn't work that time. And also this rfetch, the request fetch, I didn't explain it very well, but it avoids the round trip on the client side. So when you do server-side rendering, the page comes to the client. It doesn't perform an extra fetch because it already did that on the server. This is a Nuxt feature, by the way. Normally the types are not lost. I don't know what's wrong with my editor or anything. Usually they work.
Fair enough. And a last question. Can I somehow extract the response headers, not only body, and store them?
Yeah, of course. As long as you return a promise of the data you want to store, that's all you need. You can just use fetch, and then in the promise you return an object with the data and the headers into properties, and then in the cache you will have both.
Perfect. Great. That is all the questions we have for you, Eduardo. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.